So I did this really awesome intro and I talked really good and I was really proud of myself, and then I looked down and this was not plugged in all the way, so I was like that the whole time. I honestly think astrophotography is way easier than video production. So what I said was, tonight I wanted to do a deep sky stacker and Photoshop CC tutorial on stacking narrowband and processing narrowband data, HA, S2, and O3, and combining them in the proper channels to produce the Hubble Palette, or SHO, sulfur, hydrogen, oxygen. Because it's not just about getting that stuff put together and then just throwing in the channels and then, because what you'll have is a nice green image. So if you're into blue, green, and aqua, you're done. But if you want the blues and golds and the gaseous contrast, then you're gonna have to do some work in the selective color to get that. So let's start out in Deep Sky Stacker. Let's get everything stacked, show you how to go through that process, and then move over into Photoshop. Where I live, I've not jumped into PixInsight yet. I have. Can't get it. Just doesn't. I'm sorry. If you're out there and you're like, hey, can't wait till he does some PixInsight stuff, don't hold your breath. You'll pass out. So anyway, let's get over here to the computer. You can see the image over here. We're going to reproduce this in Deep Sky Stacker and Photoshop. So here we go. Okay, we are here in Deep Sky Stacker, and we're going to load our three, I always say data sets all the time, but it kind of aggravates me when I say that all the time. Anyway, we're going to load our oxygen, hydrogen, and sulfur data into these groups down here. So we want to go in here to open picture files, go to our folder. Whoa, 1600 Rosette Nebula is the image we're going to be doing. And let's do it in the Hubble palette, which is the way I have my filter stacked. So my number 5 filter is sulfur, my number 6 filter is HA, hydrogen, and my number 7 filter is oxygen. So let's open up our sulfur pictures. These are shot at minus 28 degrees, bin 1 by 1, 360 seconds, so 6 minutes. So select our first one, shift key, last one, click open. That's going to open up here into the main group. Let's go ahead and select our dark files. Let's get in here and grab our darks. So select the first one, hold the shift key, select the last one, and click open. So now we got our lights and our darks. This one I actually shot bias frames, but let's go ahead and grab our flats. And you're going to want to shoot, your dark frames will work across the board. They'll work for all 3 of your filters. But you're going to want to shoot flats for each filter. So a set of flats. So if we click in here, you see I've got sulfur flats, oxygen flats, and hydrogen flats. So let's grab our sulfur flats, shift key, open, and our bias can be used across the board too. So go in here to our Rosette. Let's go to our bias folder. Oops. Let's go back in here to our bias folder. Looks like I may have clicked them off, but I still have my master file in here, so we'll just click that. So that being said, our main group is sulfur. And if anybody from Deep Sky Stacker is listening out there, give us a way to rename these tabs, make it a whole lot easier to keep up with stuff. But anyway, once you populate this tab here, you're going to get a next tab pop up. So in our group 1, we're going to do hydrogen. So we're going to come back in here, we're going to open our picture files, select Shift, select, open. So here's our hydrogen. So the only other thing we need to put in here is our hydrogen flats, because we already have darks and biased loaded in the main group here. So let's just go to our flats file. We'll go to our hydrogen flats, select the top, Shift, select the bottom, open. So sulfur in the main group, hydrogen in the next group, and then you see this group 2 tab is already popped up. And we're going to put our oxygen into that group. So click into it, open picture files, go into our oxygen, select the last one, Shift key, and then first one and last one, and then open. And then we want to get our flats, our flat files for oxygen. And oops, I'm trying to drag them. I don't know why. Click open. Okay, so main group is sulfur. Group 1 is hydrogen, and group 2 is oxygen. So what we want to do is we want to find out in these light frames what our highest scoring light frame is, because we want to register all of our frames to that one. You know, and what affects this is dithering, is a meridian flip. You know, when you do a meridian flip, you're actually, where's the camera at? You're actually flipping the whole setup. So you're plate solving, and you could be off a pixel or two. And so when you combine these into channels, instead of having to try to line them up in the channels in Photoshop, we want to go ahead and have Deep Sky Stacker align them. And so that pretty much all you're going to have to do is just drag and drop them into the channels and then crop. So what we want to do is come up here on this left-hand palette here, and we want to say check all. That's going to check everything in each group. So everything that we loaded is now checked. And we go to register check pictures. And see, we got the nice green bar here. That means we have darks, flats, biased, and lights. Duh. So let's go to our advanced tab. Let's do a star count. You see, I got it pushed down to 4%. I found with shooting mono, your star count is going to be pretty low. 687 stars. Let's push that up, maybe to 15%. I'm looking for, see, I'm usually getting some pretty high star counts, but with mono, I just don't seem to. So 236 stars, I think that's a pretty good average. Let's go back. So we're going to click OK. It would start stacking. So what we want to do here in this main tab, after you click register check pictures, we're going to register already registered pictures. We're going to uncheck stack after registering. And basically what this is going to do here in the score where it says NC, it's going to score these frames. And I'll show you what that looks like when this is done. So let me, let's go ahead and click OK to that. And basically it's going to process through our 70 light frames and put an associated score based on, really I don't know what. I think it has something to do with the stars, the background. I know you're going to get a low score if you get a cloud that pops up. So it's going to score each one of these images, and then we're going to go through and see which one is the highest score and use that as our reference frame that every one of these lights will stack to, and Deep Sky Stacker will not only shift it, but align it, rotate it, whatever it's got to do to line up with that image. So let's let this do its thing, and we'll get right back. Okay, so we are done. That's pretty fast. So our main group, sulfur, you see we got a pretty high score. Like, these are some of the highest scores I've ever gotten. Like, typically my scores would be 1500, somewhere in there with a DSLR. So sulfur's got a high score of 5,229. Hydrogen has a high score of 6,225. And whoa, oxygen has got a high score of 7,854. When you first do this for the first time, your scores will be random. They'll be all over the place. You know, your highs and lows will be all mixed in. So if you hit the little drop down list and then hit it again, it'll actually sort your scores for you. And what you want to do though, if you haven't gone through and looked at each one of your lights, if you haven't come in here like to the main group and clicked on this first one and then push this gray slider over to the left to kind of do like a preview stretch and gone through each one of your images. You see that shift there? That's exactly what we're going to solve when we stack all these. If we have a shift between groups, we're going to line everything up to one image, which it looks like it's going to be over here in our oxygen data. I got the highest score, 7,584. But the other thing that you can do is kind of scroll through these lights and look at this one right here. I mean, we got a high score of 5,000 and we got this low score of 1198. Like, why? And then we got a light here of 12. Like, what the heck happened there? So, guess what? Let's remove that one from the list. And then let's look at this one down here that's a low. Look, we got a cloud in here. So these are some that I just didn't call out when I was saving them to the file. So it's good that we looked at that score. So let's remove that one from the list. So let's go over here to our hydrogen data. So high score 6,000. Let's go down here and look at our low score. Low score really isn't that big of a difference. The one there in the sulfur data, that was definitely, I mean, a score of 12, you know something bad's there. So low score one, the image still looks good. So let's go over here to our oxygen data. It had the highest score, 7584. Let's scroll down here. Yeah, I'm not upset with that, even though that's a 2,000 point difference. Still a good looking score. But it's good here during this video that we actually found these two really funky images down here in our sulfur data. So we got rid of that. Okay, so now that we've gone through, looked at all of our images, let's go over here and we're going to say uncheck all, meaning everything in all three groups is unchecked. We're going to go back here to the main group, which is our sulfur. We're going to click the first image, make sure you're at the top, scroll all the way down, hold your shift key, and click the last one. So that means we got our lights that say the L are darks, F is flats, and then our master bias or offset bias is right here. So we're gonna say right click and we're gonna say check. So everything in group one is checked. So we'll come back up here to register check pictures. So this time we want to say stack after registering. And in the advanced tab, in the stacking parameters, I have enabled 2x drizzle. And that is definitely something, if you're dithering, you want to have enabled. That really enhances the resolution of your image. It makes it bigger, but if you ever want to like print out a large file photo, definitely drizzle helps, and it definitely helps your stars. So I have that checked. Everything else is all default. So we'll click OK to that. And with that, we are going to click OK. And so now it's saying we got 2 hours of sulfur data, and we're going to click OK to that. So what it's going to do, let's stop that right here, man. I'm making mistakes for you guys left and right. One thing I forgot to do is we determined that over here in our oxygen data that our oxygen had the highest score. So let's right click on that before we stack and say use as reference frame. There's a whole point of doing this and I almost blew it. So right here, you got this little asterisk. So everything in these other two groups are going to be aligned and stacked against this reference frame. So now let's go back to our main group. Everything's checked. Register check pictures. Stack after registering is checked. We want to use 100% of them. And we're going to click OK. 2 hours. Click OK to that. So now, what Deep Sky Stacker is going to do is it's going to align and stack just the sulfur data, because our group 1 and 2, everything's unchecked. So just the sulfur data. It's going to create an autosave file. And this is real key to know. It's going to save it in the folder where the highest, where your registered check picture is, which is in oxygen. So once this is done and it says it's completed the autosave, we have to go over to our oxygen folder and find that file and rename it autosave sulfur. So let's let this do its thing, and then I'll be right back and we'll go find that file. Okay, that's done. And this was basically our 32-bit TIFF file for sulfur. So let's minimize that. Let's go into the folder here where I have the Rosette Nebula data. And remember I said the oxygen had the reference frame. So here's our new autosave, 310, 846. So let's click into that and rename it oxygen. Okay, and we'll minimize that. We'll go back here to Deep Sky Stacker. We're gonna say register check pictures, except for we're gonna cancel that. And okay, so everything in this main group is still checked. Now in our sulfur group, so for our hydrogen group, we want to stack it next. So basically what we want to do is uncheck the lights and the flats in our main group here. So let's select the first light. Let's go to the last one here, hit the shift key, and we're going to right click on that and say uncheck. And then our darks we want to leave checked. Our flats right here, we want to select the first flat and then shift key and select the last one, right click and select uncheck. And uncheck, not check. So our bias is still checked and all of our darks are still checked, because we're going to use those into the next group. So let's go into the group here that has our hydrogen data. Now it's pretty easy. Just select the first one, scroll all the way down. So that's all of our lights and all of our flats. Right click, check, and then come up here to register check pictures, stack after registering, and click OK. So 2 hours and 18 minutes of hydrogen. Click OK to that. So let's let the hydrogen stack here, and then let's go find that file and rename it. All right, so our hydrogen is done. And let's minimize Deep Sky Stacker. Where are we at here? Let's go into our oxygen folder. So sometimes you got to click out of it and click back in it, and there's our next autosave. So let's click into it here, and we're going to call that HA. Let's minimize that folder. Let's go back into Deep Sky Stacker and click register check pictures, cancel that. So this group 1, which has our hydrogen data, we're going to select the first one, shift key, select the last one, right click and say uncheck. And remember, in our main group, our darks are checked and our master bias is checked. So all we have left is group 2, which is oxygen. So let's click the first one, click the last one holding the shift key. So it means all of our flats and our lights are all checked. Once we do right click and check. So register check pictures, click OK. So 2 hours and 30 minutes, we got just a little bit more oxygen. So click OK to that and let it do its thing. So this is our last file. Once that's done, we'll find it, rename it, and then go over into Photoshop and open them and start processing this thing. Oh, by the way, I'm shooting this video on a new computer that my son and I built, and it is awesome. I'm not sure if you're watching the screen right now, but it is chewing through this data like crazy. So maybe I might post some pictures of our little build at the end of this, because he's pretty cool. For 15, he can build a computer in under half an hour. It's amazing. Anyway, stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, like some serious time has passed since I did the deep sky stacker of these 3 images. Yeah, we've had like a world pandemic crisis. Everybody's freaking out. So kind of took a little time off to deal with that. And I figured, you know what? Let's just get in here and do this. So in the meantime, between that, I actually added some more time to this image. So right at 11 hours of combined images here, total time, integrated time, however you want to put it, it's combined 11 hours. And then what I did to kind of speed things up is I went into the HA, the O3, and the S2, and I just went ahead and did a process stretch. So we can kind of go through, go over here to the history tab. The history tab says open, but basically if I turn these eyeballs off, we can go through a quick little time where I just did a stretch, did a curve stretch to get it to that point, did some background noise reduction, did the gradient. You can see I've got some glow in here, so ran gradient exterminator, which smoothed that out. And then I just went into the camera raw tab and did some adjustments in there just to kind of get it to pop, and pretty much did the same thing to the O3 data and the S2 data. And the other thing I like to do is when I'm switching these images over here in image mode to 16-bit, I also like to go ahead and change them to RGB, and that way I can use this color sampler tool and plot it here in the dark part of the area, which if you come over here to your info tab, tells me that my background is at 38. And then I just try to, see that's at 39. I try to match them up. This one's just a little bit darker at 37, but they're really close. You don't, it's just going to be a little more challenging when you combine them if your background levels are plus or minus 10 or 15 points. So with that being said, what I ended up doing was I processed it into this. So this is what we're going to try to recreate here in this tutorial video, and the steps on how to basically change it from an all green image, which is basically what you're going to get, bluish green, to, I guess they consider this the Hubble palette, where you see the blue is mapping your oxygen. I'm assuming the green is probably your sulfur, and obviously the yellow is your hydrogen. So let's go over here to the HA data, and we're going to create a new canvas to combine these 3. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to hit Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and then Control N to create a new document. And I like to go ahead and title it by the date, 3/28/20, and this is going to be Rosette in the SHO Hubble Palette. So I want to make sure that our color mode is RGB and that we're still in 16-bit. And then we hit create, and you're going to get a blank canvas. That's fine, because we're going to paste in the channels, not in the layers. So we're going to click channels. This was our HA data that we copied, so that goes in the green channel. Hydrogen alpha goes in the green channel. So it's already been copied, so now you hit Control V and it pastes it in there. So let's grab our O3 data and do Control A to select all, Control C to copy, Go back into our 328 here and go into the blue channel. Control V. So our oxygen data will go into the blue channel. And before we move on, let's zoom in here and let's turn our green channel back on. And we just want to make sure that our stars aren't moving around. So it looks like we got a good alignment, which that's what we did in Deep Sky Stacker with using that registration frame. All right, so lastly, we'll grab our S2 data. Control A to select all, Control C to copy. Go over here and go to our red channel. Control V to paste. And turn our green channel back on. Stars aren't moving around. So sulfur, S2 in the red channel, hydrogen in the green channel, oxygen in the blue channel. We'll hit RGB, turns them all on, and basically what we have is a nice blue-green image. So let's click over here to the layers, and then we can turn off, make some room here. No, we don't want to save it. Turn off our O3 and our S2. So basically here's our one we're working on, and this is what we want to strive to. So right off the bat, let's hit select, deselect. We had some major overlaps, and you can kind of see them right in here because there was such a pause, and I pulled the camera, put it on a different scope, put it back on the 80mm, so I got a little bit of different rotation. So I'm going to crop this image. So go over here to our crop tool. We just want to really focus in on the nebula itself. It's going to help us when we're doing our levels adjustment too. Bring that down right about there. So go to image, crop. Okay, so we zoom in here. We're going to notice right off the bat, you see our stars, and this is really synonymous with doing the Hubble palette, is a lot of your stars are going to get this purple halo around it. So let's duplicate that copy. And the astronomy action tool set actually has an action that'll get rid of that. So we go over here to our actions, astronomy action tool set, and let's go down here to reduce large blue violet. Let's see what that says fully. Halos. Halos. So let's click that and then run that action. I think there's an oodles of other ways to do this, but you know what? If an action does it, I like it. So bam, you see that? Blue halo, purple halo, gone. Cool. Let's rename that just so we know what it is. Purple halo. Okay. So I want to brighten this image up just a little bit before I start manipulating the colors. My background looks pretty good. I don't think I'm going to do any noise reduction. So let's duplicate that copy. Let's rename this one curves. The background's a little dark. So let's set a color sampler tool point here. Let's go right up in here. Go to a dark spot. Click that. You can see our levels are pretty low. So come here to image, adjustment, levels. Let's just push this middle slider in. We're gonna go, whoop, push that in, so 36. And let's take that blue down to 36. There you go. So now we're pretty well balanced. So now we hit curves here. So let's go in here to image, adjustment, curves. Click the finger tool, set our black point right on the back side of the data there. Let's anchor that. Even our numbers up so our line is nice and straight, and then let's just pick it up right ahead of the data there. Pretty cool. I like that. And then we can probably come in here to image adjustment levels. Let's drop that background and give it a little contrast. Right there, 32. Cool. Man, we've got some killer data. This is some awesome stuff. I hope you can see it as well as I can on YouTube. So next thing is we want to start our color adjustment. And I've got an app here. Actually not, it's an app. It's a website that kind of gives you the color, selective color sample adjustment points. And I'll try to paste a link to this because it is very helpful. But what I've found is it tries to get you to completely remove colors, like 100%. So you're going to take out the cyan and green, 100% of it. But what I found is that it's almost a little too aggressive, so I do it in halves, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to come down here to this little icon here, the little half semicircle. These are our adjustment layers. Click on that. We're going to go to selective color, and let's rename this first one green. So in the drop down list, we're going to choose green. And basically what we're going to do is, instead of pulling out all the cyan at one time, I'm going to go about halfway. And then instead of adding or decreasing my magenta by 25%, I'm going to do it about 15%. Close that. Create another selective color adjustment layer. Double click on it, and we're going to rename this one yellow. So do our color drop down list, go to yellow, same thing. Just going to reference it really quick. So instead of pulling all the cyan out, we're going to do it about halfway. And instead of adding magenta, we're going to add about plus 15 on the magenta. Okay, so let's minimize that. Another selective color layer here, adjustment layer. Double click on it. We're going to rename this one cyan. Do our drop down list here, choose cyan. And this one actually goes in 2 iterations. It's basically taking all the yellow out. You see it actually starts to increase that blue. We're going to go halfway. Close that down. Do another selective color adjustment layer. Rename it cyan. And we're going to go about halfway with the yellow again. And let me reference this. And instead of doing 25%, 30% magenta, we're going to go about 15%. I just like to do this a little more incrementally than what this website says, just because I've seen it pixelate real bad. So let's select that first one and come down here and hold our shift key, select the green. Let's drag that all down to this little folder and let go, just like we would duplicate a layer. Double click on it, and we can name this select 1. So if we turn it on and off, you can see the adjustment that we made. So leave it on, and let's go through that same process again. Selective color, adjustment layer, rename it green. Go up here to our drop down list and choose green, and then pull out the cyan again, about halfway. And what was that? And then we're gonna decrease the magenta somewhere in there. Click OK. And let's do another selective color adjustment layer. We're going to rename it yellow. And here's where your eyeball really wants to come in, because you're looking for a gold. You're looking for all this to be gold out here. So let's drop down list, yellow. Let's pull that cyan out. You can see we may almost get to 100%. We're going to add the magenta, and that's going to darken it up. Now you really want to use your eyeball to what you like. The other thing is this black slider here. This will basically brighten, almost take out the color. It's almost like it desaturates it. But if you add black, it almost increases the saturation. You see that? So I like that right there. Another selective color adjustment layer. Cyan. Choose our drop down list. Go into cyan. So let's pull that yellow out. You see now we're starting to really get that blue. We're going to probably go 100% on that yellow now. And a little bit, take the magenta out. And then like I said, we can also add some black to it, and it actually darkens it up. And let's do that one more time. And let's pull that yellow out again. Let's see, what was it here? Take some of the magenta out, which I like that. Actually, if I take it out, it almost brightens it up. I like to add a little bit, and then you see how when you add the black, it really gives you some blue and gives you some depth there. And it's funny because doing this, you can almost tell that I really didn't get it very much. You know, let's look at this other one. See how I've got more blue than I got with this one? And it's almost like you can go by these numbers, but you're really not gonna get the same image every time. But if we select this one, hit the Alt or the Shift key, select the last one. Oop. Select the top one, Shift key, and select the last one. Drag it down here, create another folder, and say select 2. Let's put an L in there. Otherwise it's seat. And you turn these two off. We've definitely made a huge difference. So now I want to basically start working on it, but what am I going to work on? I've got these two folders here. So I want to create a stamp of everything that's below this. So I'm going to come in here and hold the Shift, the Alt, and the Control key at the same time and hit the letter E. And that's going to create a stamp of everything below these folders here that we can start working on. And so with that, let's name that camera. It's like my favorite tool here in Photoshop. So we'll come in here to filter, camera raw filter. And I 2 times drizzled this one, so most of these things that I'm doing here are kind of slow just because of the size of the file. So let's just run through this real quick, my favorite steps. So I'm going to add some clarity. Like that, almost do that, bam, look at that, how much more nebulosity that brings out. Dehaze it just a little bit. I'm going to add some vibrance and a little bit of saturation. I think I'm going to come over here to the tone curve, and I might take out, I'm going to add the highlights, add the lights, and then bring the shadows down just a little bit. Now I'm going to come over here to the detail tab, and I'm going to sharpen it up, and then I'm going to add some luminance and color noise reduction. This is globally. And let's see what that looks like. Wow. I mean, wow. I don't know what else to say other than wow. All right, so wow. Wow. So we got some really cool details up in here. So let's enhance some of this stuff. So the first thing I want to do is I want to enhance some of these bright spots. So I'm going to come down here to the adjustment layer palette and click on it, and I'm going to go to curves. Use this little whatever this is to I think it auto calculates the histogram peak. Anyway, so let's just raise it up globally, right like that. Not too much. Right there. And then in this layer mask, we want to hit Control I, and then inverts the layer mask and puts it right back to the way it was. And it's black. We want to come over here to our Reveal tab, make sure it's set to white, which it is. Let's choose our brush, and I've got an opacity of 22% and a flow of 40%. And then my hands on the bracket key here, I'm just going to come through and paint in some of these really bright spots. I can be very selective with this if I want. Open it up. And then you can just choose your eyeball here. You can see how I'm brightening up the spots here. Okay. So we're just going to brighten up some of these highlight areas in here. Especially this little twisty detail down in here. I mean, who knew the Rosette Nebula had this much detail in it? I certainly didn't know when I shot it a year ago and could barely see anything. I was darn glad to have it. And I like this little lightning detail in here. Alright, so you can see what we've highlighted. Alright, so let's do this again. Curves, adjustment layer. And let's bring it down. Right there. And then same thing, Control I will invert the layer. Mask. Close that. And then our brush is still selected, our foreground is still set to white. And now we want to get right in here, use our bracket tools, and just darken up some of these areas in here. And this detail effect of making a global adjustment, inverting the layer mask, and then painting in just what you want can be done for anything. It can be done for noise reduction, it can be done for sharpening, anything. This is a really cool, really helpful tool. So now we just click the eyeball. See how we're enhancing the details there? Zoom in. Boop, boop. Awesome. So these are definitely areas that we want to blacken out. And watch this. See, I just it's almost like it sharpens them. I mean, this is some mega detail. It's about almost 4 hours, just a little bit under 4 hours per filter. And I went a little heavy. Actually, I think I got like almost right at 4 hours of oxygen. I shot more oxygen than anything else. And all my subs were 6 minutes at bin 1 by 1, and I'm shooting unity gain. So let's look at that. Awesome. Cool. So let's create another stamp layer. Control, Alt, and Shift, and then the letter E. And we could do one of two things, but I think I'm going to just really subtly kind of minimize the stars using the dust and scratches. So I'm just going to rename this layer as dust and come up here and go filter, noise, dust and scratches. It's got a radius of 4, and I've found with dust and scratches it doesn't look like this when you click OK. It's almost like it doesn't really give you an accurate preview. So let's just click OK and see what it looks like. See the stars pop back in there. We still maintain quite a bit of detail, and one thing we can do to sharpen it up but still have that star reduction in there is to change the blending mode to darken. Okay. We'll click that and back out. So let's look at that. Subtle, but I like it. Okay, so let's duplicate that layer. And let's call this sharpen. And remember before I said we can, with the invert layer mask, we can use that for any process. So let's come up here to filter and let's go to sharpen, and we're going to go to smart sharpen. And I'm probably going to do an amount. I'm going to push that amount to 200. We'll push the radius to 3 and do a little bit more noise reduction. I'm going to leave the this remove set to lens blur, and I'm going to click OK to that. Okay, so it's done, and it actually really didn't jack up the image too bad. You zoom in on it, let's see. See, our stars are kind of got a little halo, and then it puts this little, you could apply a layer mask and then invert the layer mask, Control I, which would turn off all the sharpening, and then you could come over here to your paintbrush tool, just kind of sharpen up these areas. So you're leaving most of the image soft and you're just sharpening up. Let me make this a little bigger, else I'll be painting all day long. Just these subtle areas in here. And one other thing I want to show you that you can do is, after you've painted something like this, and it works pretty good, or the best, when you're using the brightening tool, or when, you know, before, when I actually did a curves adjustment and I boosted the brightness and then I just painted the brightness back in. But if you come back in here to your layer mask and right click on it and hit selective mask, you can see where you painted, but you can actually take this feather tool and push it over, and you see that kind of feathers out what you did, smooths out. Cool. So from this point on, you know, you could do another selective. You could go back into here to the cyan, and you could take out some more of the yellow to blue it up some. You can add some black. If you see what I'm doing there, I'm almost like that's exaggerated. If you really want to get some more yellow out of it, I like a little, to me, that pulling a magenta out actually makes it a little too white. So I like to add a little bit. You can also add some cyan as well. Close that down. And then you could come back in here and add another selective color layer and go to your green. And then just pull all the cyan out of the green. You see how that basically takes all the green away, but I actually like a smoother transfer from the yellow to the green if we turn our eyeball on and off. You got to be careful too, because it can really pixelate some of these yellow areas that are still there. And you can obviously add some. But from this point forward, we've basically achieved the Hubble palette, which shows your oxygen and your hydrogen and sulfur interaction, where your oxygen is blue, your sulfur is a kind of a greenish area, and then your hydrogen would be all the goldish yellow. So this would be technically the Hubble palette. So from this point forward, I think it's just a matter of personal preference of how you want to continue processing and enhancing and editing your image. So I'm going to leave it at that. So thanks for watching. Sorry it took so long. You didn't really realize it took so long because you probably think I did this just like an hour ago, but no, this is taking a while. And Other thing is, be safe out there. Stay 6 feet apart for a while, and just hang out at the house if you can. If you gotta go to work like me, be smart. Other than that, clear skies and clear minds. Until next time.